Howdy everyone, I'm Mantra, and man do I love tabletop role-playing games. Honestly, I haven't been playing them for super long, all things considered. I first started with a Pathfinder 1st Edition game about 8 or so years ago, which is a game that, despite a lot of rotations and breaks, is actually still going on. And since then, I've had the pleasure to both play in and GM several games in both the D&D and Pathfinder systems. I'm actually really close to the end of running the Strange Aeons adventure path for Pathfinder, and I've grown to love this game more than most other games that exist. I'm a huge fan of actual play shows, and I really want to try my hand at making some D&D content. Finally, right? Now, a key aspect of these D20 games is of course the things you get to fight. My favorite part of the game has always been the monsters, and as soon as I start collecting sourcebooks for D&D and Pathfinder, I immediately started collecting the bestiaries and monster manuals. Now, to preface really quick, this is a direct tie-in to my Cryptic Creatures series, specifically the episode of Cerberus, because of course it is. If you want to learn more about the big dog himself, I highly recommend checking out the card above. It'll also be at the end of the video, and I'll be referencing topics that I talk about in that video and explain in detail there, here. I absolutely love making an interconnected web of content. I think it's so fun. So the pitch of this series then is of course that I want to design some stuff that you can use for your home games. And the main gimmick is that I will be designing monsters and encounter scenarios and such that are going to be as mythologically accurate as I can get. I want an encounter with these monsters to be similar to a story that you could go read about encountering one of these creatures with, of course, a few tweaks necessary to make things interesting, trying to find a good blend between keeping things novel and interesting and somewhat mythologically accurate. It's a weird balance that I'm trying to hit with this. So, for each of these videos, I will be designing custom stat blocks for each creature I cover. A good example is like the Chimera. Chimeras of course exist in Pathfinder and in D&D, but they're very different from the actual mythological Chimera. Chimeras in D&D have wings, and all of their heads breathe multiple elements sometimes, and they have a dragon head, and that is not like what the actual Greek myth was like. So I want to, shake things up and offer some alternative options to some of these monsters. Now, I will be basing things off of existing stat blocks, and I'll talk about that in a bit, but I do want to create something that is my own composite piece of work. I'll also be creating maps and even some magic items for you to use with these potential Cerberus encounters. And I'll also talk about a couple ways that you could set up an encounter with Cerberus, like what scenarios might you find him in, how would a combat or a non-combat encounter go. And all of this will be found at the homebrewery link in the description. It is free, but I encourage you to watch this video first. I put a lot of effort into it, and I want to explain some of the decisions I made in that document. Anyways, I'll be providing stat blocks for D&D 5e and Pathfinder 1st Edition. For D&D, I'll be working on providing some things for the new 2024 updates as well, but I know we're still getting some of that, and the systems are pretty cross-compatible, all things considered, so I'm less worried about that. For Pathfinder, however, I've been playing 1st Edition for my entire time with the game. I have not played 2nd Edition, and I don't know much about it. I think it's really cool. I just don't know enough to actually make content for it. And so I apologize about that. But again, use this stuff to inspire your games for any system. I think that you could use some of these ideas to inspire, say, a Monster of the Week game or a another non-D20 system game. That, though, is enough of my patented rambling up top. Let's get into the good stuff, right? So I think the most difficult part of this process was choosing a challenge rating for Cerberus. D&D, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have an official Cerberus. Plenty of homebrewed ones exist, because of course they always do. Pathfinder sort of does. They have a CR6 Hellhound, which is a slightly spun-off version of the monster, and Frog God Games also has a CR23 Cerberus from their book Tome of Horrors. which is a very, very strong, like, singular legendary creature encounter. And that's the key. Cerberus is a specific entity with consistent placement in mythology, and I want to reflect that in the design choices I've made. This is one creature, not a species of creatures. Based on what we already have, I settled on a challenge rating of 13 for Cerberus. I think that you'd need to be fairly strong to be able to defeat Cerberus, but also in the mythology, so many people with various levels of skill are able to find ways around the beast. So I don't think that a crazy CR of around 20 necessarily works either. This is a monster, but it is not a god. 13 is a good middle ground between the two CRs of the Pathfinder creatures that I'm going to be using to inspire this creature. And I have linked those stat blocks that I mentioned in the description if you want to use those instead and see where I got the idea for some of my abilities. Again, I want to give credit where credit is due, but let's get into the specifics. I've given Cerberus, of course, 4 separate bite attacks. 3 of them, of course, with its usual dog heads, and 1 with its serpent's tail, which is sometimes an aspect of Cerberus that is forgotten. I have made the serpent tail venomous, and it has a shorter reach, and it's a little weaker than the 3 jaws. For 5e, actually, I relegated it to only a legendary action. This, of course, is a legendary creature, after all. Now, I've given Cerberus various options to be able to grab opponents with its jaws. Pathfinder has higher scaling, so Cerberus is able to deal a lot more damage by potentially swallowing grabbed opponents whole, or making multiple bite attacks on the same target and dealing rend damage. In both systems, though, Cerberus's bite has a curse on it that I've called Hell Jaws, which is a dimensional anger type effect, based on the CR6 Cerberui that I mentioned earlier. If you are cursed with Hell Jaws, you cannot leave the plane that you are on through any means. You can't even teleport or use Dimension Door, since those take you through the astral plane. I think that this is a particularly important ability, given that Cerberus's job is preventing souls from leaving the underworld, leaving hell. And speaking of that, I've given Cerberus the ability to bypass every single immunity that an undead creature has, because this thing is specifically here to stop the undead from leaving. It's much less a guard dog to stop people from coming in, more for coming out. And I think because of that, it needs to be able to affect undead with all of its abilities. Cerberus already lives in the underworld most of the time, so again, it makes perfect sense. I also gave Cerberus the ability to smell the souls of living and dead creatures, as it has in a couple of its other stat blocks. It can track even ghosts and incorporeal beings by scent, and I've given it a frightening howl to frighten foes. Of course, Cerberus is also functionally immortal. I'm using Percy Jackson rules in this case, where Cerberus will reform later in its lair after you defeat it. Speaking of its lair, I've come up with 2 main places that I think you would find Cerberus, depending on what setting or mythology you're ending up using for your game. By all means, put him anywhere. Put him out in the middle of a field if you want, if that's what you want out of your game. But here are the ideas that I've come up with. If you're doing a more Greek-inspired game, and it doesn't have the planar structure of D&D or Pathfinder, the obvious choice for where to put Cerberus is at the gates of the underworld themselves. Souls need to cross the river Styx, which is a difficult task by itself, and then they need to pass by Cerberus, and they will enter Judgment, for where they will spend eternity in Asphodel, or Elysium, or Tartarus. Now, potential lair actions for a fight at the gates of the underworld might include underground tremors that knock players prone, bursts of magma coming from under the ground, and the waters of the river Styx wrapping around Cerberus, helping protect it from damage like Achilles. The other layer that I was considering is the third circle of hell. This was a much harder one to kind of chew through, because I wanted to base it off of Dante's Inferno, which Cerberus appears in the third circle of hell for, which is, in Dante's Inferno, the circle of gluttony. He's one of the main threats, aside from the swamps and freezing rain that Dante has to pass. And both Pathfinder and D&D have a 9-circled hell, but the similarities aren't really exact. They don't follow the same sin structure that Dante's Inferno does. Again, they're their own systems. Now, both systems have the third circle as a circle that has to do with greed, ruled by the demon Mammon, not gluttony, which is usually Beelzebub. Now, D&D's third circle is called Minaros, which has a closer feeling to Dante's third circle. It's mostly a stinking mire, a terrible swamp. And I think you could absolutely place Cerberus out in the wilds there, looking for souls to torture and eat. In Pathfinder, however, the third circle is Erebus, which is a labyrinthine dungeon full of incredible wealth, as well as all of Hell's tax documents. There's a spot in Erebus, however, called the Orthrus Vault, which is a cavern where legendary monsters are basically locked up in case Hell ever has the need to resurrect them. And I think having Cerberus guard this spot might make sense, especially given the Greek mythology reference in the name of the vault. Cerberus, again, there to stop people from setting these monsters free, not there to stop them from getting out, because I think Cerberus would realistically be weaker than some of the things that might be in the Orthrus Vault. You alternately could put Cerberus in Cocytus, the seventh circle, which is a frozen wasteland that is ruled over by Beelzebub. Or you could choose to create your own Dante's Inferno-inspired third circle. The possibilities are endless, and my suggestions are only suggestions. Now, I didn't provide lair actions for a swampy third circle of hell lair, which include like an obscuring fog cloud surrounding the party, also freezing sleet that can reduce the party's speed like Ray of Frost, or zombies, hungry gluttonous souls rising to attack the party and give Cerberus a couple of minions. So this begs the question, what kind of encounters can we actually put together with Cerberus? What's great, of course, is if you have your own stat blocks for Cerberus, you could use those instead. I want to provide things that you can use to either put in your campaign or base your campaign ideas off of. I want to make very free-form type content. So here are a couple scenarios that you could potentially look at playing within your games. I think a really interesting pitch for an encounter would be having a reason for a lower level party to visit Hell, something that would absolutely lose to a fight with Cerberus if they actually tried. Now, in a Percy Jackson type game especially, this is super duper easy. There's plenty of reasons to send Percy Jackson characters to the underworld for one reason or another, for some sort of quest. But if you're not doing that, you're going to need some stronger motivation. Maybe you're saving a dead party member from the fires of hell, or you're saving an important NPC. And I think it would be really interesting to make it very easy to get into hell, which leaves Cerberus as an encounter that the party knows is coming, has seen a little bit of what they might have to do, and then has time to come up with some sort of solution to subdue the monster, because they can't outright fight it. However, things like invisibility wouldn't cut it. Cerberus would absolutely be able to smell invisibility or gaseous form or something that would allow people to try to move past, so unless they could do so very quickly, Cerberus would be on them. Additionally, I have a magic item in the next section that could work well with this, or the party can come up with their own solution. I think that that's what's really fun about this. Setting up Cerberus as a guard dog for, I think, any location is a very good spot for him, whether it be Hell or the Underworld or somewhere, again, completely different. I think another interesting quest, however, could be Cerberus is some reason in the material plane up on the surface causing havoc, and you have to take Cerberus and bring him back to the Underworld or back to Hell, culminating perhaps in a fight with whoever let him escape. This is actually like a reverse Hercules' 12th labor, because Hercules has to capture Cerberus and bring him to a king, and I think that it's another really cool quest line that doesn't provide just a fight and allows you to interact with this like cool giant monster in a very different sort of way than just fighting it. But of course, a classic fight with Cerberus isn't a bad thing. Cerberus is an immortal monster, more or less, and you know, sometimes you just gotta do a fight. If you're using the Pathfinder setting, you might want to consider there's a monster or NPC in the Orthrus Vault being locked away for future resurrection that you need to go rescue. If you want to use a higher level Cerberus, again, I mentioned the CR23 one that exists in the description below, or you could throw the advanced or mighty templates on Cerberus to bump him up to like level 14 or level 18, depending on how powerful your plane hoppers are. Or, again, maybe you just need to get in or out of hell for whatever reason. The possibilities are endless. These are ideas for your potential campaigns, and every game is different, so I'm a firm believer of the fun of tabletop games being the fact that you can just kind of make up whatever you want. It is one of the best things about this game. Now, finally, I've provided 2 magic items for both systems that I think might be fun. One would be something you could potentially loot from Cerberus or get as a reward for helping him, and the other is a tool that you could use to subdue Cerberus in the event that you don't want to necessarily fight him, and it might be helpful in other encounters as well. The first of these 2 items is the Triple Jaw Collar. The idea is that this is one of Cerberus's old magic collars, a little bit inspired by being able to get Cerberus's collar in the game Hades. But it doesn't provide a health bonus in this version. Instead, it allows you to gain a bite attack, which would be an unarmed strike in 5th edition or an additional natural attack in Pathfinder. If you already have a bite attack, like say you put this on one of your animal companions, your critical multiplier for your bite attacks would increase to ×3. 3 times a day, the wearer of the Triple Jaw Collar can activate it as a swift or bonus action to imbue it with power. If the next attack that they make is a bite attack and it hits, you get an extra effect. The damage in 5th edition is simply tripled. You deal triple the dice damage and triple the strength damage, which could be even sextupled on a crit. In Pathfinder, however, I elected to just let you roll 2 extra bite attacks at the same bonus. Both of these abilities are lost if you miss on the initial bite attack, though. And this magic effect manifests as 2 spectral canine heads striking out of the collar along with you to bite alongside you. And the second item that I've built is a magic lyre called Lover's Lament. This is based off of the lyre that Orpheus from Greek mythology was known to play. He played a song so sad that it even made Cerberus sad. I think that Lover's Lament might be the very same lyre imbued with a little bit of extra magic. So, playing Lover's Lament imbues the musician with increased spell attack bonuses and save DCs towards their enchantment spells. I will very, very quickly explain this because the rules are quite different between the 2 versions for this one. For 5th edition, you get a +1 bonus to your spell attack and spell DCs of all of your enchantment spells. And then for each extra head the opponent has, you get an additional +1. Against Cerberus, you'd have a total of +3. Against a 100-headed monster, you can have a total of +100. And additionally, you can spend and roll bardic dice to increase the potency of your sleep spells specifically, increasing the amount of HP that the spell can target. Now, I know the 2024 version of sleep doesn't work like that, so instead, if you are playing that version, I think that the lyre should be allowed to bypass sleep immunity. Try to put an elf to sleep by spending a bardic die and using this lyre. Now, the Pathfinder version is a bit crunchier. You get a +1 bonus to your performance DCs, such as Fascinate and Suggestion, provided their enchantment effects. And opponents hearing these performances get a penalty based on the number of extra heads that they have. No penalty for a normal 1-headed creature, and then a -2 for each extra head that it has. Cerberus would have a -4. You can also spend points of Bardic Inspiration to give these same bonuses and penalties to your enchantment spells. And those are my ideas for D&D Encounters with Cerberus. I hope you enjoyed seeing some of them in action and found something that inspired you for your game. Again, these are suggestions. I encourage you to do your own badass thing with your campaign using whatever pieces you like. And I plan on doing more of these, especially over the creatures that I've already covered in my Cryptid Creature series. And I'm going to leave a card in the top, as I mentioned, if you have any interest in seeing my full explanation of Cerberus. There's plenty of cool stuff that I didn't even get to reference. The link to the final PDF is going to be in the description below. I am not going to be selling this or anything, so it should be free for you to grab if you want it. And if you want to see more, please leave a comment and a subscription. I'm hoping that I can get to like 1,000 subscribers this year. I'm keeping my goals very modest, and any support in that regard would be lovely. I'm going to be making much more monster content, and if I feel crazy, maybe some other stuff. The next video should probably be the cryptid creatures episode on the Yuki Onna that I mentioned, but there's a chance I end up writing the next one of these videos instead and doing a video on the rock. We'll see where things go. But thank you for watching. Again, please leave a subscription or a comment or a like or something if you enjoyed the video. Have a great day and happy DMing!